All right, welcome back to Sunday Nation. Joining me now is Democratic State Senator from the 2nd District, Sylvia Santana. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Bankole.
I want to begin with redistricting. Happening at a time, Democrats are in charge of Lansing. Now you're basically running things, but you're returning back to Lansing at a time when we have a declining number of black legislators. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, when you think about it, Bankole, we, obviously we're making momentum in the legislature, especially the city of Detroit. We had 15 people representing us in the city prior to the redistricting commission. And now when you look at how the districts have been broken up, where portions of Detroit have been broken off, now we have a total of 3 members in the actual, or African Americans in general overall. Yeah. In the Senate, we have 3. And then in the House, we have a total of roughly 15 people representing us, just blacks in general.
Right, right.
But as for the city of Detroit, we have even a smaller portion in that. You have myself and Senator Stephanie Chang that represent the city of Detroit, that are from Detroit, but also we have fractures of our districts that are going into the outlier areas.
So you are the only black voice in the Senate from Detroit? That
is correct. And Senator Geis obviously represents a portion of Detroit, but she's from Taylor.
Right. So it's almost as if Democrats winning in Lansing, you'll be in charge of the legislature now, but looking at this declining number of black representation, it's like a mixed bag, if you will. Is that fair enough?
I would say, definitely demographics of districts are changing. You have a lot of people who are migrating to the suburban areas. Right. Obviously when there's upward mobility, more finances in the household, people make different decisions about where they want to live. Yeah. And so what we have found, even through the redistricting commission, is that now in the Kent County area, you have Kristen Grant, who's African American, who is representing a portion of that area, but also Erica, who is out of Macomb County, who also is representing Macomb County, which is predominantly a area that's suburban, but she's African American, who also represents a small portion of Detroit.
I don't want to litigate the redistricting fiasco. It played out. We saw how it played out, but it's just I just feel like it's deeply ironic, and almost to a certain extent unfair to have Michigan's largest city, the nation's largest black city, in the Senate to only have 1 African American in the Senate, and when you look at the House, a declining number of black representation. I mean, that is very telling. Do you feel that in Lansing, though, there's a sense and recognition of that?
I think there's a recognition of it. I think that when you look at just how the leadership positions have taken place, you have Joe Tate, who's the first African American to be the Speaker in the House, and then you also have in the Senate some, representation of African Americans in the chairmanship positions for appropriations, Sarah Anthony. But I still believe that there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's been a decline in African American representation in the legislature for many years now because population decline.
So this is basically the culmination of all of that?
Absolutely, yes. But we do have to make sure that moving forward that we do have representation in the Senate and the House and throughout Michigan when it comes to politics.
So one of the questions I keep asking is whether, the fact that we have a Democratic legislature, we have a Democratic governor, a Democratic attorney general, a Democratic secretary of state, as it relates to the governor, probably she wouldn't need to use her veto pen anymore because Democrats are in charge. I'm curious though as to, is this going to be a golden era for black Michigan? Now that we have, it's all Democrats, no more excuses to say Republicans are standing in the way. We wanted to do this, but they stood in the way and said no. So we could not compromise, or we compromised with them, and it was a bad compromise. Now you're basically in charge of power. Is this going to be a golden era for black Michigan?
Well, I'll tell you this, Bankole, from my perspective, you know, definitely we're Democrats, and there's progressive Democrats as well as moderate Democrats.
Yes, I do recognize that.
You have a fractured across the board. But I will say this, my intent as a legislator is always to make sure that I'm putting my community first and make sure that I'm prioritizing my community. And I would hope that Democrats across the board, from the governor's executive office all the way to the legislature, will make sure that we are prioritizing the Black agenda, because obviously we are the electorate that is voting for Democrats, and our issues do need to be prioritized. And so there is no more need for the excuses of we can't run these policies or we can't run the agenda of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus. We have the opportunity now, and we need to make sure that we move forward in that direction.
And I want to bring this up on the table right away and get into some of the issues that you think ought to be brought to the table. But I want to kick off with Benton Harbor. That's an issue that we've kept at the forefront in Southeast Michigan as far as we're concerned here. Last week I had Elnora Gavin, who one of the newly elected members of the Benton Harbor School District on the program. She made the case that Benton Harbor School District debt should be wiped out by Lansing. It's about $12 million. Benton Harbor has played a lot in the fight for urban education in Michigan. I don't think any school district in the most recent past, in the last 5 years, has played out so significantly than Benton Harbor. Is that something that you think should be a top priority for Democrats in Lansing, how you address educational equity, taking into consideration what has played out in Benton Harbor and what other urban communities are dealing with?
Absolutely, Bankole. I can take it back even further. When I first came to the legislature, that was the first fight we had with the Republicans, was making sure that we kept our schools in Detroit, making sure that our kids are not being bused all over the place in order for them to have equitable education. They need it right in their communities and to have the resources right in their communities. And so it goes the same with Benton Harbor. It's a $12 million deficit that they're currently looking at, right. And it was 16. Right. There's no reason why we as a legislature can't make that happen, especially when we have $5 billion on the table of resources that we can allocate towards making sure that that school district is made whole. When you're busing children to other school districts, they may not necessarily be accepted in those school districts, although maybe the school district has more resources. Yeah. It's better to give people the type of resources they need for education right where they're at and make that equitable. We've seen it with Inkster. Inkster kids, their school district was basically disintegrated, yeah. And then they're having to go to neighboring schools and try to fit into those communities.
And there are challenges when it comes to fitting in, because some communities don't want Black kids, period.
That's true. And so that's why it's important that we make sure that education is equitable across the board. And I think we've tried to do that as a legislature by making sure that we are investing in our school districts, increasing the per pupil dollar amount and the foundation allowances, yeah. As a state, and making sure that we are competing with our Midwest region when it comes to the per pupil allotment. So we still have a long road ahead when it comes to education, I believe. As you know, today the report came out stating that children, because of the pandemic, are behind. And so it's going to take them at least 4 to 5 years to catch up. And so now we need to prioritize making sure that education not only is available during the school year, but also making sure that we're invested in that extended school year opportunity for parents to be able to get those additional resources to support their kids getting back on track.
So let's go through your list. I mean, yes. What are the other issues that you're concerned about in terms of the next legislature here? What do you plan to champion? What are some of the issues coming down that you think are important to take on?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the key issues that I've championed, right, been able to make some traction in the legislature will be criminal justice reform, public safety, and also economic opportunities. And so what that all encompasses is making sure that our returning citizens have a fair chance at being back in the community and having the necessary resources for them to move forward in their lives. I had a parent, both parents of mine have been incarcerated before. And so I feel that it is definitely something that as a country, we have so many people incarcerated, but yet on the back end of that, they're not able to move forward in their lives. And so we as a society have to take that scarlet letter off of their chests that says they have a felony, yeah, and give them a fair chance at being reformed and rehabilitated and making sure that they can move forward. So that will be a continued opportunity to make legislation and policy decisions as a state. We have done a better job of it and getting our numbers down as far as recidivism, as well as making sure that those resources are available. But that will be one of the key priorities I'll continue to work on. Disparities in our community, we've seen it happen so much with this pandemic. We knew already that Black and brown communities were not prioritized when it came to health care. And so even through this pandemic, I have found ways, and with my colleagues, found ways to make sure that access to care is equitable. We've made mobile clinics. We've had more resources going to our federally health qualified clinics as well, and making sure that people just have basic dental care, increasing the dollars that we spent in those areas also. So I want to continue to work on making sure that healthcare is a priority. That's something that we need that there's a lot of investment in. But also making sure those resources get across the board.
So let's talk about what that is gonna look like in the Senate, because you used to be a member of the Appropriations Committee, correct?
Absolutely.
So tell me in terms of what that would look like in the Senate here, because I know you indicated that they're progressive Democrats, they're moderate Democrats, but I think one thing that people don't want to see, obviously, is that now that you're in power and you're divided, you can't even come around an issue. People don't want to see that. I think it will undermine the entire, the not only the victory of the last election, but the entire essence of Democrats being in power if people see you divided over even the simplest of issues, whether they're urban or rural issues. So what is that going to look like in the Senate in terms of supporting some of these initiatives, funding some of these programs?
Absolutely. I think, quite frankly, I think healthcare is it's a nonpartisan issue, right? Absolutely. People need healthcare no matter where they live, if it's rural, urban, or suburban. And so I think, from my standpoint, that we definitely have to make sure that this is not just a Democratic agenda, but it's also an agenda that also helps to support our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We've worked for them for the past 40 years, if you will, and had to come to agreement on things, but now we're in charge of those agreements. And so I think some of the priorities where we have been able to make strides will be obviously realized even on a larger scale now.
Right. So looking at all the issues that you have mentioned, what would you rank the most urgent issue right now as we hit January 2023? What do you think Democrats can go to work on right away?
Right away, I think some of the biggest or the key issues that we could work on right away is the earned income tax credit.
Right.
That is something that has been decreased over the years through the Republican administrations. And I think that's something that really will help put money back in people's pockets right away, especially low-income houses. And so I think that's something that we can do. And obviously, it's going to be a Democratic agenda. We may have some Republicans on board, but we'll see where that goes. And I think that's something that we can prioritize right away. I think we could also prioritize making sure that we repeal the right to work. That was something that really has impacted so many people in our communities, and it's been a benefit for corporate America.
Yeah, but is that significant, though? Do you see that as important? Is there an urgency for that? There are folks who are saying, well, why focus on right to work? Because it was a big battle on that. Certainly, the unions are behind that. But when you look at the earned income tax credit, when you look at right to work, which one is more important?
I think getting money back in people's pockets is the priority, obviously. I think that's something that really will be important to making sure that people have dollars in their pockets. Right now, people have more a month than money. And so we need to make sure that we're prioritizing our communities. So I think that will be the biggest priority right now. I think the other big thing is making sure that our retirees get their money back in their pocket too. We have taxed their pensions. And so that has caused them a lot of, stress as well, because they don't have the number of dollars in their pockets. So I think whatever we can do right now to repeal the pension tax and work on the earned income tax credit, those would be the top priorities.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. Democratic State Senator Sylvia Santana here on Sunday Nation. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. I'm Bankole Thompson.